My name is Brianna, and I want to start out with some audience participation for a minute, so let me get your attention. And by raise of hands, how many of you have ever been in or to a hospital? All right, now how many of you have ever eaten like the food that they serve to their patients? What do you think? No, not good? Yeah, I didn't think so either. So I start out by asking that because I want to talk about a time in my life where I spent a lot of time in hospitals. So March of my freshman year, my dad went into the ER one morning with some pretty severe back pain. And my mom and dad didn't think it was too big of a deal, you know, he was just like experiencing pain. He was a firefighter, so it was affecting his work. They just wanted to get him some pain relief. So they said, you know, we'll meet up with you guys later. We'll send you to a friend's house. So off we went, me and my two siblings, to our friend's house, and we would meet up with them later, whether they got admitted or sent home. So later that day, my friend tells us, you know what, your dad got admitted to the hospital, so we're going to go visit him. And at this point, I still didn't think it was too big of a deal, you know. I thought, okay, maybe they gave him some like pain meds on an IV drip and he had to finish a saline drip or something. And so we went, and we went up to the 6th floor. And I don't know if any of you know the significance of the 6th floor at CMH, which was where he was checked in at. And so we get up there and we're walking and we turn the corner into their room, and immediately I'm like, oh no, red flag, this isn't going to be a good day for me, because the first two people that I saw in the room are the pastor and his wife. And you know it's not going to be a good day at a hospital when you walk into the room of your loved one and the first two people you see are the pastor and his wife. So I walked into the room, and the sight that was before me is something that I'll never ever forget. My dad, this man, he's a bigger guy. He's a firefighter, pretty strong dude, stoic, stone-faced, doesn't ever show any emotion. This man was laden up in this hospital bed, and he had tubes everywhere. He had the pulse oximeter on his finger, and he had the IV in his arm, and he had the oxygen tubes in his nose and around his face. And this man that showed no emotion was lying there sobbing as he told my siblings and I that the 6th floor of CMH was the cancer floor, and that he had been diagnosed with the most severe form of testicular cancer. And not only that, but it had metastasized throughout his entire body, and he had a mass in his back, which was what was causing his pain, and he had masses in his lungs, which was why he was on oxygen, and he even had 2 masses in his brain. And so very quickly, my dad went from looking like this to looking like that, and thus started his cancer journey. And he underwent surgery after chemotherapy, after more surgeries and more chemotherapy. And a lot of that time was spent at CMH, but even more of that time was spent at USC Norris, so about an hour and a half drive away, right? One of the leading cancer hospitals was trying to save his life. And from March to December of 2014, my father spent 100 days in the hospital. 100. Think about that for a second. Between March and December of any given year, there's about 300 days. And 100 of those was spent in the hospital. And so that's a lot of time for him to be in the hospital, a lot of time for us to visit, a lot of time for him to be eating hospital food, and for us as a family, myself especially, to be completely underwhelmed by the nutritional value of the food that hospitals are feeding their patients. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, is what are hospitals feeding their patients and how does it need to change? So the first thing I want you to understand is when you eat food, when you're putting nutrients in your body, you're doing one of two things. You're either helping to heal your body in some way by the nutrients that you're bringing into it, or you're hurting it and you're poisoning your body. And it's really that black and white. There's not much gray area in between. And so the first thing that you guys should understand is that when you eat sugar, you're poisoning your body. And when I talk about sugar, I'm not talking about the sugars that you get from fruits and complex carbohydrates. I'm talking about refined sugars, simple carbohydrates that you get in like candies, breads, pastas, those types of things. And so a couple of things that sugar does when you ingest it is, firstly, it causes inflammation. Think arthritis. If you guys have an older relative who suffers from arthritis, it's inflammation and swelling of the joints, and it can be extremely painful, and that's largely caused by the consumption of sugar. The next thing that sugar does when you consume it is it causes oxidative damage and mutations at the cellular level in such a way that causes heart disease, that causes diabetes, and finally that causes cancer. And that's what I want to focus on today, is the correlation between sugar and cancer. And we've known that sugar has been correlated with cancer for a long time. As early as 1931, the research of German biochemist Dr. Warburg found that sugar feeds cancer, that glucose is the preferred source of fuel for cancer cells, and also that despite countless secondary causes for cancer, the primary cause of cancer is the replacement of normal cellular respiration within the body with the fermentation of sugar. I'm going to say that again. The primary cause of cancer he found to be the replacement of normal cellular respiration with the body with the fermentation of sugar. That's crazy to me that sugar can cause cancer and that sugar feeds cancer. And so hospitals know that, obviously, right? His research was widely accepted in the medical and scientific communities way back when, in 1931. And something else that I found in my research of what hospitals know about this correlation was the use of PET scans. And so PET scans, you go in this machine, and my dad underwent this process plenty of times. And it takes a picture of your body, and the tumors light up and they glow. And I'm like, whoa, how do you get tumors just to magically light up when you take a picture of them? How does that happen? So they actually inject you with a contrast dye beforehand, and I think my dad had a bad reaction to it at least one time. But here's a less obnoxious picture. So you can see the tumors glowing, and the contrast dye that they use is what really interested me. I was like, okay, what could they possibly be injecting into your body that would attach itself to tumors and not to the rest of your body? And so it's actually a radioactive isotope. That's how it glows, is because it's radioactive, and it goes by the name of fluorodeoxyglucose. And so here's the medical definition of fluorodeoxyglucose, but that's basically a big jumbled up bunch of words that means radioactive sugar. So hospitals are actually measuring tumor growth by injecting your body with radioactive sugar, knowing that the tumors will absorb more of the sugar than the surrounding tissue. So hospitals know that sugar feeds cancer, that sugar causes cancer, and yet they still continue to feed their patients extremely low quality food. And actually, according to Lindsay Getz of Today's Dietitian, she found that hospital meals oftentimes are of lower nutritional value than fast food meals. Lower nutritional value, that's crazy. And she also looked at another study, which I'll talk about in a second, but just to examine this statement, hospitals feed hundreds to thousands of patients every day, right, depending on the size of the hospital. And because they're having to make food in such high volumes, they rely largely on low-quality vegetable oils and low-quality meats. And by low quality, I mean raised on a corn diet. They're not eating the food that they would eat in the wild where they have a natural life. They're usually pretty kept cooped up and not much room to roam. And so these foods are filled with omega-6s. You might have heard of omega-3s. It's a dietary supplement you can take, and that's anti-inflammatory. And so omega-6s are the opposite. So they're inflammatory, which double whammy, right, with the consumption of sugar. Now you have these omega-6s in your oils and meats. And the other thing that omega-6s are is immunosuppressive. You can imagine how catastrophic that is for somebody who's already undergoing chemotherapy, which is destroying their immune system in the first place. So now their food's hurting them even more. And so Lindsay Getz looked at a study done by UCLA, and they surveyed California's children's hospitals. And what they found was that of the 384 entrees offered in California's various children's hospitals, only 7% of them could be considered healthful. Furthermore, half of those menus had no options that they found to be considered healthful. In California's children's hospitals, they're feeding kids poison while they're in the hospital undergoing immense physical traumas. And so I've given you all these statistics, but now I want to talk to you about some of my personal experience. So this picture is a real picture of some food my dad was brought on one of his first days of CMH. And they brought him about five things, just as a casual snack. And so let's examine them. First we have some Mott's applesauce. That's 11 grams of sugar and 13 grams of carbs. And I'm counting carbs in my sugar count because when you ingest carbohydrates, your body actually turns them into sugar before it can process it as energy. So that's 13 grams of carbohydrates that your body is treating exactly the same way as it's treating sugar. So 24 grams of sugar in just that little cup of Mott's applesauce. Then we have some graham crackers, 29 grams of sugars. 33 grams for some chocolate pudding, right? One of my favorites. A little can of Sierra Mist, 59 grams of sugars that he's ingesting by drinking that little 8-ounce can. And then finally, we have some Yoplait yogurt. I think it's strawberry flavored. 43 grams of sugars, Mr. Brianna. and so this is a large reason why I got into this issue, because I knew the correlation between sugar and cancer, right? I was going through biology at the same time as he was getting this diagnosis. And I was like, okay, so they're like giving him chemotherapy, which is killing the cancer, but they're also feeding him almost 200, the clicker's not responding anymore. They're feeding him almost 200 grams of sugar that's going to go to feed the cancer cells, right? The cancer cells are going to absorb that quicker than the rest of his body. All right, it's still not responding. No. Can you just press the next arrow? I think it'll get it to engage. Okay. And so they were feeding him all the sugar that was feeding the cancer that they were trying to kill with the chemotherapy, and I was like, why are they doing that? And this was at CMH, but he was also treated at USC Norris, right, one of the leading cancer hospitals, and I found that the quality of their nutrition with the meals that they were feeding him didn't differ much. It was pretty much the same. And so I've given you the facts of what hospital food looks like, but now I want to talk about what should it look like, right? If we know that it's wrong, what does it need to look like? How do we need to change it? And so I love this quote by Hippocrates, food is your medicine, hence let your medicine be your food. Just think about that for a second. I think that's a really powerful quote. There's a lot that we can do with our food that can be used as preventative medicine, right? So I want to examine some of the guidelines I found put out by the Department of Health and Children in Ireland. You might be thinking, Brianna, why would you look at guidelines put out by Ireland when you live in America? Because America doesn't have these guidelines for their hospitals, so I had to look at them from Ireland. And so they actually have some guidelines set out specifically for oncology. And on a 9-inch plate, they say half should be filled with fruits and vegetables and beans. So that's where you're getting your carbs. Again, complex carbohydrates. These things are filled with micronutrients, antioxidants, and trace minerals that are helping your body in its natural homeostatic processes to aid in the healing process. The next quarter should be filled with lean protein, preferably locally raised animals with room to roam and like natural diets. So that they're filled with omega-3s and not omega-6s. The last quarter should be filled with starches. Again, complex carbohydrates filled with those good micronutrients that will help your body fight its illness. And so you're thinking, well, great, like you have these guidelines, but clean food is expensive, right? And clean eating is really expensive compared to the food that hospitals are using right now. And I would say, yeah, it is, but here's why the cost is worth it. So the Department of Health and Children in Ireland found a direct correlation, and they said that the length of one's stay in a hospital and the cost of that stay is directly related to the patient's nutritional status. And they found that undernutrition in sick patients is associated with a variety of ailments. The first of which being impairment of every system in the body. So that includes the immune system, again, catastrophic for chemo patients. And also muscle weakness, particularly respiratory muscle weakness. So if you're already having issues breathing, your food's not helping you at all. And then delayed wound healing. You're not getting the nutrients to fulfill the natural homeostatic processes in your body. Apathy and depression, which is just as dangerous and just as real of a medical issue as physical ailments. Reduction of appetite, so not only are these patients getting poor quality nutrients, now they're getting none because they're not eating. And finally, and this is the big one, undernutrition in sick patients is associated with higher mortality rates. So you can see that this is a very real, a relevant, and a dangerous issue that needs to be addressed. So I just want to leave you with this quote by Hippocrates one more time. And so I just encourage you to take some of what I said to heart, and hopefully you can prevent yourself from the heartache and the trauma that is the experience of cancer and its treatment. So I just encourage you to eat well and live healthy. Thank you.